Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Italy Travel Podcast. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And today we are talking about what it's like to drive in Italy and some helpful information about driving in Italy.
If you are renting a car or planning on renting a car for your trip to Italy, then hopefully this will be helpful to you either to assuage your fears or to at least inform you on what to expect.
Yeah, but before we get into that, as always, we want to thank all of you who have been following and leaving reviews. It helps us so much in the internet sphere, and it also warms our little hearts. We appreciate it so much. And a big, big thank you to Amanda and Brian and Ariel and Austin, who are our Rigatoni tier members on Patreon. Thank y'all so much. If you want to be super cool like them, you can go over to Patreon and support us there or join the chat for free. You can find information about your trip to Italy and Italy info on onlyabag.com. That is articles written by myself and Nathaniel. You can also contact us there.
Thank you all so much for listening and for your support. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So, I guess jumping into the
I wanna jump off with two questions.
A lot of jumping.
We're just jumping around. We're literally not jumping around. It's impossible on a podcast. I mean, maybe people do. I can't. So I want to ask you two questions. The first one is pretty basic. Which side of the road do we drive on in Italy?
Very, very great beginning. I actually did not put that in my own notes. We drive on the right-hand side, and likewise, the cars have the steering wheel on the left-hand side. Mm-hmm. You might see people driving down the wrong way. This is just because we're in Italy, not because that's the road. They often turn 2-lane streets into 3-lane streets.
That is not legal. That's not something we recommend doing. It is something that happens, especially near where we live in southern Italy. My second question is, if I already have a driving license in my home country, do I need anything in addition to that to drive here in Italy?
Super question. And that actually segues me into my first tip, or I guess piece of advice.
Awesome.
Y'all might even thought we scheduled this. Not scheduled, but
arranged.
Scripted this.
There we go.
There was an S word. So yes, you do. And what you need is an international driver's permit. I'm sure y'all have heard of this before. It is essentially just a translation of your license into something like 24 different languages. If you are in the United States, you can pick this up at a AAA or the Automobile Association Transportation Authority, something like that. It's AATA or ATAA.
We'll put it in the description.
We will. Each country has at least one organization that not gives out, you have to buy it from them, but that will supply you with an international driver's permit. It's a pretty straightforward sort of thing. If you are leaving soon, you do need this now. You cannot get it when you are here, mainly because, one, you in theory need the international driver's permit to actually rent the car. Mm-hmm. As a brief aside, you might hear stories of people saying, oh, actually, they didn't ask me for one at the car rental, or I got pulled over and nobody asked me for the international driver's permit. I don't think you need one. Yes, okay, for sure. Like that happens without a doubt. No doubt. It's the same thing like when we've talked about you have to travel or you have to walk around Italy with your passport. It is a bit sketchy feeling for sure because you don't want, no one wants to get pickpocketed and lose their passport. At the same time, it is illegal to walk around without it. A photocopy does not count. So going back to the international driver's permit, yes, you do need one at all times while you're driving, while you're renting. So you can't get one when you're here. That said, again, very brief aside, if you are here for like a month and change and you decide to rent a car, I think like at least in America, you can do the ATAA or the AATA has an online option, and then they can FedEx you your IDP within a couple of days. So it takes about a week to get it. I think some other countries, England, if I'm not mistaken, has a much quicker online option. But in theory, you need this before you leave. You also either need to go to a place physically because they need to take your photo, or you need to send in a photo, a driver's license photo, which if you have them lying around, perfect.
It was super fast when we went to do it. We went to AAA years ago to do it. And I thought it was going to be much more time intensive than it was. It took less than an hour. And I think at the time it was, how much did it cost?
So it's 25 for that one at AAA. I think the ATAA or the AATA. I'm sorry, I'm not. I had it in my notes, but I have it both ways because I can never remember if it's the Transport Automobile Authority or Automobile Transport Authority. And that one's, I think, a little more expensive. It was 40, if I'm not mistaken, for that one. They shouldn't be too expensive, even in other countries, Australia, England, anywhere else. England, actually, I'm not sure you even need, I think they still have an agreement, a post-Brexit agreement to be able to drive without IDP. I think that's mostly for every other country besides England. And I did just look that up. Yes, if you are from, I believe, the UK in general, you do not need an international driver's permit to drive in the EU or Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein,
Cool.
places that are not in the EU. So if you are listening to this from England, you're good. Do not panic. Everybody else, get an IDP if you are renting a car or
Everybody
planning on.
outside of the EU and the UK.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Thank you. That is actually really good. And you also looked up, it is the
AATA.
AATA. Okay. Again, if you're from the States, you might not have heard of them before. I did not know they existed. I just know that AAA is sort of,
Classic.
classic. Exactly.
I think I only heard about the AATA when somebody we know needed an international driver's permit and the AAA in our hometown had closed. And then I found out about the AATA.
Exactly.
So they both work.
And then now that we know what we need, I want to go ahead and jump over, a lot of jumping in this episode, to speed limits.
Okay.
I think everything else is a fairly self-explanatory. On Friday's episode, we'll talk about like automatic versus manual, size of cars, can everybody drive, that type of thing. But this episode, I mostly wanted to focus on like the 4 or 5 most important things. If you only listened to one of the 2 episodes, I wanted to just basically give you the more important information, which is valid driver's license, valid international driver's permit. They are only good for 1 year, so make sure yours is still valid if you got one last year, for example. But then speed limits.
Question before we go into speed limit. Sorry.
Answer. Daily double.
You can just go back and get another driver's permit,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Okay. So if yours expires, you can just go get another
You
one.
can get another one. That's not a
Awesome.
problem at
Okay.
all. So there are 4 major types of roads in Italy. And that is at least within Italy, they have their own sort of classification. And it's the urban roads or roads within towns and cities. They have the extra urban secondary roads. That's the roads between 2 towns typically. The extra urban principal roads, which are sort of like highways.
Okay.
If in the States, it would be closer to a highway. And then there's the autostrad, which is also like a highway. It was privately owned for many years. In fact, the Benetton family, famous for the United Colors of Benetton, used to own the road. And then I believe after the disaster with the bridge in Genoa, the Italian government bought it because they thought that was a bit dangerous. So it's kind of like 2 highways. The autostrad, mostly a lot of north and south. There's definitely some east and west, but essentially think of it like the veins and arteries that connect to the north and the south. And the extra urban principal roads, while they look similar for sure, they're more connecting oftentimes you'll see them east and west for whatever reason. I don't think there's a specific reason for that. It just happens, at least where we are, they tend to run east and west. But the point is that the speed limit on the autostrad is 130 kilometers an hour. This is about 80 miles an hour US. There is a slight grace period if you're going just everywhere in Italy. If you're going over 100 kilometers an hour, there's a 5% speed limit grace.
So you can go 5% faster than the speed limit
Exactly.
is supposed to be.
So if you're going 130, you basically can go 5% faster than that, which is an extra 6.5 kilometers faster, so 136. And if it's under 100 kilometers an hour, the grace period or grace limit is only 5 kilometers an hour. I mention this because I know in the States, some people, my father being one of them, thinks that there's like a 10 mile an hour grace period. He's like, you can go 40, you can go 50. It's really up to you. It isn't. It's not up to you. It's up to the police, mostly. So
I think that's speeding.
yeah, I think that's just straight speeding at this point. I've never met a man who's more bewildered when he's pulled over for speeding. And I'm like, not everything is within the grace period of speeding. So yeah, don't speed. It's also the speed limits will lower in the rain. This is more important on the autostrad and the extra urban principal roads. They all drop by about 20 kilometers an hour. So the autostrad, which again, north-south, it has the tolls when you enter. The autostrad is also sort of uses green signs. So if you see a green like road sign, like we would have in the United States, actually, very similar color, and it says, Rome, Milan, whatever, that's the autostrad. If it's a blue sign with Rome, Milan, whatever, that's the extra urban principal.
Oh, I did not know this.
Yeah, so blue is extra urban principal, and then green is autostrad. Also, autostrad, all their highways begin with A. So A1, A2, A3. So it's a little easier.
And you're explaining all of this because the speed limits are different on these different kinds of roads, right?
Yes, even though, yes. And actually, and I know this is kind of dry, and I hope it's not too dry for y'all, but it's slightly important because while they look the same, the extra urban principal and the autostrad, they are two carriageways with at least 2 lanes each. I think they both have typically 3 lanes, though, not including an emergency lane. And they have a physical divider down the middle, whether it's guardrails or something like guardrails or just trees, a ditch, something. The autostrad has a speed limit of 130. The extra urban principal road has a speed limit of 110. Both of these drop in the rain by 20, so to 110 and to 90. Likewise, keep an eye out if you are driving like in the rain or fog, because a lot of them will have little signs that has like a new speed limit. Underneath, it'll be a little extra sign, and it will augment the speed limit. So it'll be like 50, and you're like, 50? We're on a highway. But then it'll have like a picture of rain or a picture of fog or snow. Obviously, that means only 50 if it's raining or snowing. So just keep that in mind, because there are no police typically. That's like in the States, sometimes like on a highway, you might get pulled over by
There's like police posted up on the sides of the highways and stuff to...
Exactly. Like we have Georgia State Patrol or the Highway Patrol, and they'll pull you over. Here, it's mostly done through video cameras and other types of cameras, regular cameras. It's a system called Virgilius, or I think in the north, it used to be called Tutor, Tutor. I think it's now all Virgilius. And they are very clearly marked. You basically pass through an archway, for lack of a better word. It has at the top, like, this area is controlled by Virgilius. You pass through, everybody gets their license plate taken a picture of, the back license plate, and then you keep driving, and then after, I think usually a few kilometers, you hit the next one, and it'll take another picture again, and it'll average out your speed. So that way, it's that sort of way of, you can go a little fast if you're trying to pass somebody in the passing lane, and then, slow down again, and you'll still be under the average speed. If you happen to speed, they will simply send a ticket to whoever owns the car you are in. So if you are renting a car from Avis or Europe Car, Sicily by Car, they will send a ticket to them, and then they will pass that ticket on to you, usually with an administrative fee. On Friday's episode, we will talk about paying that fee. Do not worry, but the most important thing is speed limits. Just adhere to them, because there's not a lot of wiggle room.
And there's no way of knowing if you have been, like in the States, I feel like a lot of people speed, and a lot of people think, well, if a cop didn't stop me, then I'm free to go. Here, that is not the case. You are tracked by the cameras on the highway.
Exactly. So that is actually very good. I think a lot of people on Reddit and TripAdvisor will mention that I had no problem with police. Like, I never got stopped. It was fine. And then like a few months later, they might get the tickets. So just keep in mind, even if you don't see like the consequence of your action immediately, it will come eventually. So keep that in mind. As I mentioned, there are 2 other kinds of roads, the extra urban secondary and the urban roads. Extra urban secondary connects mostly like 2 towns, or a city and a town. I mean, Rome to Bracciano on the lake, for example, Rome to Ostia will be connected by an extra urban secondary road. Typically, you might be on the highway to Ostia because there's also a highway. It depends what you're on. That limit is only 90. It's amazing. You study all this information and immediately forget it. That limit is 90, and so, I mean, people will go over that for sure, but just keep that in mind. And then in cities, typically, or towns, urban areas, which is a bit of a confusing terminology, I will say, because sometimes, especially like where we are, there's a medieval town and there's a lot of sprawl, and it's not just 50, which is the speed limit in the urban area of the town. It's also the entire sprawl is 50, and because the area, the valley we live in, is basically there isn't any everything's owned by some municipality or some town. There's not actually any area in our valley where you can go over 50. Even if it's a long stretch of road between two towns, you never actually get onto a extra urban secondary road. So you can never actually get up to 90. You are still stuck at 50. Just keep this in mind if you are driving around like Tuscany, for example, or if you are driving, maybe you're driving down to Pestrum from Salerno and you decide to not get on the highway, but you want to be
You're taking smaller roads.
You take this more scenic route, things like that. The big reason I wanted to mention all of the speed limits in general, as Darcy I pointed out actually off mic, is that they are not often posted.
Which is so different if you're from the US. I imagine it's like this in many other countries. The US has speed limit signs posted all the time. I'm sure there's a standard distance that they are posted, but it feels like you can almost always find a speed limit sign so you know how fast you're supposed to be going. Here in Italy, and I think in most of Europe, you have to know, based on the road that you're on, generally what that speed limit is supposed to be. They are far less frequently posted.
Exactly. And I will get into this in Friday's episode, where there's like speed limit signs, minimum speed limit signs, and then end of speed limit signs. That can be kind of confusing because you might have gone through an area that's 80, let's say, instead of 90, or 40 instead of 50. And you're like, okay, that looks like the end of 40. But what is the speed limit now? Like,
Right.
did it go up to 90? Did it go up to 110? Like, what is the speed limit? So if you're on the autostrad, green signs, highway, it's 130. I don't think it's marked anywhere except like maybe before getting onto the autostrad or somewhere. Every time we're on like along the side, like on a highway in the United States, you'd see, speed limit signs frequently, not necessarily in Italy. Extra urban principal, 110, extra urban secondary, 90, and then urban, 50. It's just basically see where you can go slightly faster than trucks and then go slightly slower than the people in Audis and BMWs is typically how it goes.
That's a good tip.
And then, of course, I didn't even mention this. It's not really about speed limits, but there is a pretty big importance placed on the use of the different lanes.
Yes.
Just as a heads up, I know this is for some of you listening, you're like, I get it. I just move to the next point. But for those of you from America specifically, I'm saying as an American.
Yeah, in the U.S., we take the driver's test and we know that you're supposed to stay in the right-hand lane unless you're passing. And then, in big cities like Atlanta, there are like 5-lane highways, and LA, I imagine. And you're consecutively going faster in the left-hand lane. Yeah, but if you live in the U.S., no, most people don't care about that when they're actually driving. People drive willy-nilly in all the lanes. Here in Italy, and I do believe in most of Europe, people really stand by that rule.
Yes.
You stay in the right-hand lane unless you're passing.
And for some people, it's also the middle lane. And I mention that because the right-hand lane has a minimum speed of 80, which is the minimum speed of the autostrad. It's also where you find most of the trucks. The trucks use the central lane as a passing lane because they are not allowed to use the far left lane. So you always...
Trucks meaning like big transportation
trucks.
Yeah,
like 18-wheelers, I think is what we call them.
Yeah.
We call them articulated trucks, apparently in Italy. Did not know that.
Not like somebody with a pickup truck.
Not somebody with a pickup truck.
Which are not very common here, but they do exist.
And interestingly, buses will do not have to adhere to that rule. They can absolutely use the left lane to pass.
Okay.
But the point is, do not hang out in the left lane, even if you're like, I'm going really fast. Middle lane, always, if you're going fast, and then use the left lane to pass somebody else in the middle lane, especially because the people in the left lane do sometimes go fast. And they will honk and then the lights and the whole 9 yards. Likewise, if somebody is trying to pass you, they will either flash their lights at you or honk slightly. And it's just to let you know, hey, I'm about to pass. Please don't also jump in front of me. It's just like a way of communicating.
Yes.
So
also on that, if you are driving and someone gives you a little honk, like as they pass by you, or like Nathaniel said, if they're behind you and you can tell they're trying to pass, that's usually not an aggressive honk. people use their horns here in Italy. I don't know if it's a Southern Italian thing, as a little, hey, thanks.
100%.
But obviously you can't change the tone of your horn.
Yeah.
So it can sound really aggressive, but very likely they might be like, toot, toot, hey, I'd like to pass, toot, toot, thanks so much. So that might, raise your cortisol if you're driving and you're like, oh, they're so angry at me, that jerk. That might not be their intention.
For sure. Especially when sometimes it's a truck and it's like honk, honk. And you're like, oh my God, I'm getting out of the way. What is going on? It's just the truck trying to pass very politely. Anyway, moving on to locations. This is the final big thing I wanted to talk about. It's a broad subheading, but breaking it down into 3 major subheadings, I think is easier for y'all. And also it's the 3 most important things. First, I want to talk about driving in cities and break that down into 2 subheadings. I love subheadings. The first part of driving in a city is the chaos. If you are in the north, if you are doing a little drive around Lake Como, if you're going into Milan, if you maybe are taking the car to Parma or Padua, it's pretty beautiful the way people drive. Honestly, it adheres to laws. It's beautiful. It's just really well done. And in the cities especially, it's really nice. I mean, genuinely, people tend to follow road signs, speed limit signs. They don't try to do anything kind of shifty. They're not going the wrong way down a one-way street because they only need to go a block. They really only need to go 1 block and then they can turn off or anything like that. It's pretty clear and a fairly tranquil drive. As you move south, this tends to disappear. Rome, I think for people who are not used to driving in busy cities, is the first moment where they're like, this is chaos. Who drives in Rome? This is insanity. Naples is like the ultimate, I think, version of that insanity. If you are driving, I know some people will say never drive in Naples. If it's on your bucket list, or if you're just like, I love driving, I would love to drive in a place where people have zero respect for cars around them.
For me, it is not. That is
not on the bucket list.
Am I allowed to swear and say hell? I don't think that's too bad. That is one of the rings of the underworld for me. I would never want to drive in Naples.
I feel like it's exciting. In the back of a taxi, there's a real sense that, again, I think we've talked about this before, but there really is a sense that people drive like you're going to get there or you're not. And, either it's not your problem anymore or nice, I got money and then I do this again, because it's the people like, they kind of find the little gaps between 2 cars. They shove themselves into traffic that has no opening, but nobody wants to hit a car, and that's kind of what they're counting on. So there's a lot of chaos in cities. If you are a confident driver, if you feel comfortable behind the wheel, if you're also 100% paying attention, you'll have no problem, genuinely. When I say paying attention, a lot of people more frequently than they used to drive on their phones, or drive.
Meaning they text while they're driving.
Yeah, they text while they drive, or they're on TikTok while they're driving. I'm not being funny, but sometimes you'll see them on that classic like
it's awful
scrolling thing where they're going to the next video and they're just, not just on highways where people, you'll see truck drivers just sort of like, oh no, I'm paying attention, but you'll also see in cities where people are just sort of bored and scrolling. I'm like, how are we bored while driving? So that happens. You just have to be super aware and paying attention. The other thing is that pedestrians have the right of way. Again, they will sometimes step out into traffic and have no problem risking it all on the off chance that, again, it's either a huge like insurance payout or they get to the other side of the road. In theory, they have to be on the crosswalk. In practice, they're not often on crosswalks, especially in places like Naples. They will just cross kind of wherever, and it is still up to you to stop before you see them. In fact, I think there's a lot of questions on the test itself, the theory test I took, about kids specifically will not know. You can tell them all you want about the crosswalks, but if you see kids near the side of a road, it's a strong encouragement to start slowing down because they might just bolt across the road.
That makes sense.
And then people who have, walking sticks, people who are visually impaired with sticks, you have to basically already pause and be ready because they also might not know
absolutely
where the crosswalks are, if there are even crosswalks. So there's a lot of like the not the impetus, but basically the ball's in your court.
The onus is on the driver.
The onus is on the driver. So in the States especially, I know that this is a common, where we are, we talk about this all the time. In Savannah, I think a lot of people think it's a very pedestrian-friendly city. A lot of Europeans do especially. It's not an uncommon occurrence, sadly, for European pedestrians to get hit by cars, thinking that a driver will stop when they see them. And a driver is thinking, you're going to obviously get out of the way. I'm in a car. And that's kind of an interesting culture clash. But keep in mind that people might just jump out in front of you. The second subheading is the ZTL. You might have already heard about this. It just means the Zona di Traffico Limitato, or limited traffic zone in English. It's not the same as an LEZ, which also has a Z and an L in it, which is the low emission zone, which is essentially like you can only go through with like hybrids or electric cars or cars that are in like the Euro 6 or Euro 5.
And those are, I know ZTLs are also common in cities, but what is it, LEZ?
Yes.
Those are common in cities because they're trying to lower emissions where there's a high people population, right?
I think in Milan, they have low emission zones. It's like mostly the middle of the city where you have to pay to use your car, but only if it's like in this certain zone, like only if I think it's like if you're already Euro 6 or something, you can pay to be in there, but if you're not,
which is a level of emissions on cars.
Yes. Okay. It's like the, Euro 7, which is even more strict, is going to be rolled out, I think, in November of this year. But right now it's like the strictest level of emissions. And I believe even then you have to pay to be in there, but everybody below that, or Euro 5, can't be in this zone until like a different part of the day. And then the restrictions loosen.
That's a lot.
It can confuse a lot of people. The biggest thing, and like I said, we'll talk about this on Friday's episode, are the fines. That's the biggest thing. Nobody's pulling you over. Nobody's arresting you. Nobody is confiscating the car. This is all done through automatic systems.
And the ZTL, though, is different. Are the ZTLs, there usually is a sign on the road saying it's a ZTL?
There should always be a sign on the road.
Okay.
It's typically for a variety of purposes. Sometimes it's about emissions. Sometimes it's about a pedestrian zone, or a pedestrian zone just during a certain time of the day. For instance, like a street turns into a pedestrian only, like during the middle of the day, but in the afternoons or mornings, the residents are allowed to drive through to get to and from homes. This you see a lot actually in Florence, where around the Duomo, there are certain ZTLs, and the balustrades will actually come out of the street and turn it into a ZTL is closed. No one can drive through. I believe residents have a little clicker in their car, and then they can drive through. And then I believe, though, in the afternoons and mornings, I think it's open for anyone to drive through as they use it to, again, get out of the city.
But some will be a ZTL that you're not allowed to drive through unless you're a resident, for instance, but they don't have any balustrades. They don't have anything blocking it off. So it is easy to drive through one because it looks like a street and because you're being a safe driver, but you still might be ticketed because technically only residents are supposed to be driving through at that time.
Exactly. And that is a big thing to pay attention to. If you are just kind of following traffic and you're like, oh, well, my hotel's over here and there's a bunch of cars going this way, I'll go this way. It is easy to get stuck behind a line of cars who are all going through a ZTL, and sometimes there's not really a way off, or if there is a way off, it can cause like a kind of a traffic issue, if that makes sense, whether you're holding up traffic or something like that, taking a turn down a narrow street. It can be difficult to avoid in some cases. I think mostly like a lot of the center of Rome have ZTLs, so you can be on the it's like the Lungo Tevere.
Okay.
The along the Tiber is, I think, that highway is called, or not highway, but it's the major road inside of Rome that runs along the highway. I don't think that's part of a ZTL, but when you kind of go into Rome, you're in a ZTL. This is not to panic you guys, to be very clear. I just wanted to let you know that basically in cities especially, there are ZTLs. Siena has a lot of them, which is why they have so many parking lots outside. I believe by and large, there's no cars allowed inside the historic center of Siena. This is not...
Siena would be a tricky place to drive around inside of.
Exactly. I think they came to the same conclusion.
Yeah. I mean, unless you live there and you know the streets and, all that. But if you're new to town, it would be very tricky.
Well, we Perugia is not the same as Siena, but it is quite similar. And while you cannot drive up at the top of town, except for certain times of day, it is kind of the same where it's narrow, tight streets. It's like this is a one way at this time of day, and it's a one way going the other way at another time of day, so they can direct traffic. We got caught in a ZTL because we just were not paying attention and we didn't
Well,
realize.
we were living on this street and we were moving out, so we took the car up there to move out all of our stuff, but we hadn't been registered as residents necessarily, and we were renting a car, so technically we weren't supposed to be there, but we didn't know that, so.
And it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Some people will just drive kind of regardless and chalk it up to yet another, travel expense. This can work. Again, I'll talk about that Friday. I don't recommend that. I really would recommend either looking up a map of a ZTL. So like you can do Rome ZTL map.
Oh,
These are freely available.
Cool.
And they let you know where these areas are, what time of day they're active, who can go through, who can't, the whole 9 yards.
Super.
Because some of them are, while most of them are for like pedestrians and stuff like that, some are emission zones. And so while a ZTL is active, you can actually pass through with a hybrid car or an electric car, again, depending on where you are. This is not the case for all of them.
That's really good to know because whenever I visited Rome with my mom and my cousin, I noticed one near where the hotel that they were staying, and a taxi took us, I think, to dinner or something. And I thought we were going to go straight, but it was a ZTL, so we took a left. And that's all to say that if I were driving, I might have been way more focused on, are there people in the road? Is this my right of way? Is the light green? And not thinking about, is the road in front of me a ZTL, because you could go that way or take a left. So the map is a really good thing to know.
Exactly.
It exists.
And on that note, I just want to tie that back into, you talk about Rome. It's technically an urban area, so you might think, well, 50 is the speed limit. Obviously, the posted speed limits, I think all of the, now, currently, this year, they've changed it. So all of the speed limits in the center of Rome are now 30.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because it was like 30, 35, 25, and it was like kind of, everybody was like starting and stopping.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So the local speed limits obviously override the 50. It might still be 50 when you kind of get out to the outskirts of Rome where you don't see posted speed limits, but in the center it is
And
30.
30 kilometers an hour is close to 15?
18, I think.
18 miles an hour? Okay.
Yeah. So it's slow enough that if somebody were to jump out from behind a car, which is not uncommon, you can stop in time.
It's crazy it might feel crazy if you're coming from the US, because in the United States, our school zone, like the slow driving, is 25?
Yeah, 30, I think, in some places.
Okay. I remember it being 25, kind of like in neighborhood roads and stuff. But once you're in Rome and you see the way traffic moves, you will realize why 18 miles an hour, 30 kilometers an hour really makes sense. It can seem really slow, but it needs to be.
It does. Last, I wanted to talk about, as the location is Amalfi Coast and Cinque Terre and things like that, because this does show up a lot, especially like online. And I know that for some of you who are thinking about coming to the Amalfi Coast, the classic question is, should I rent a car? We have talked about this, I think, at length, so I won't go too much into it, but it's the same thing as for, chaos in cities. If you are a confident driver, then you will probably not have much of an issue. If you feel like you can drive defensively, if you're not worried when somebody behind you is trying to go fast or trying to overtake you. Again, I believe this is largely illegal on the Amalfi Coast Road, and it does not stop many people. If you are okay with tons of traffic, that's another big thing, is especially in the summer months, now it's going to be probably a nightmare, but until September, even into October slightly, there will be lots of traffic. So if you're okay sitting in traffic and then, looking out the window kind of idly, and then, we got to move again. And, the start and stop sort of mind drifting kind of traffic, then you're probably going to be fine, genuinely.
And if you're okay driving on mountain roads, there's a cliff face and then just a rock wall on the other side.
Exactly. It's that can also be harrowing. Sometimes you have to figure out too, if you're passing and somebody else is passing and you both have a big car, because sometimes the rocks do jut out ever so slightly, especially around the turns. Y'all might have to figure out which one of you goes first. It's also not uncommon, especially if you are on the seaside. I was going to say the right-hand side, but they're all right-hand sides. the seaside of the Amalfi Coast Road, it's not entirely uncommon for people to stop and pull over at the slight little pull-off areas, but like there are pull-off areas for 1 or 2 cars, and you might see 5 or 6, and so they will very much be in the road. This is often the source of a lot of slowing down in the Amalfi Coast Road. Yeah, that just might be yet another, you paying attention to people opening doors, paying attention to a crowd of people on the road. The Amalfi Coast Road is also used as a kind of like a sidewalk between towns. So you see a lot of full-time residents who use it to walk between towns, sometimes with groceries. Sometimes the fishermen will just have a little kit and their little rod, and they'll be walking to the next town to go fishing. So keep this in mind that there's a lot of stimulus. In a bus, as we've always recommended, is much easier because you get to do all the looking without any of the driving. A boat or ferry specifically gives you more options for leaving and not having to wait as long to get on a bus. But if you are like, I've always wanted to drive the Amalfi Coast Road, it's beautiful, definitely do it. I would, but if driving the road is your dream, not necessarily seeing the Amalfi Coast.
Yeah, I think that's 2 different things. There is being on the Amalfi Coast Road and seeing it, and then there is driving on the Amalfi Coast Road. So just deciding which of those is your bag.
Because like October, November is not a bad time to drive in the sense that it's not as busy. But the summer is not, there's no wind in your hair, top down. Like, this will be lovely. This is start and stop traffic for, 25 miles.
Yep.
So just keep that in mind. And that has been
Cinque Terre?
That has not been this episode. Thank you for reading my notes and let me know. I appreciate that. So the Cinque Terre is the other major town I wanted to mention in terms of driving that you can't actually drive into. You might see cars and other vehicles there. Those are like delivery vehicles, taxis, usually some sort of vehicle with special permission.
And Cinque Terre is 5 different towns up on the Mediterranean coast in the north.
Yes, okay. It is the Ligurian coast, if you will. It is south of Genoa. You can drive through La Spezia, which is like a big city near it. You cannot drive I don't believe the Cinque Terre website even says you can't drive through most of the towns on Cinque Terre. And I'm like, there's 5 towns. Which one of the 5 can you not? So I don't know if they mean more like part of one town is technically drivable and the rest are firmly no. But like Rio Maggiore, for example, which is it's the first town going north. Absolutely no driving. There are parking lots outside of Rio Maggiore you can park and then either walk into or take a bus into. And I don't know if of the other 4, any of them have available.
I think the farthest one north is Monte Rosso al Mare. I think that one you can drive in partly. It's a bigger,
sprawled.
Yeah, there's more sprawl and it's a bigger city. I think. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, I wouldn't plan on driving into any of them.
And then the reason I wanted to mention that is not just for driving to Cinque Terre, but if you are imagining I'm going to be driving along the coast on a mountain road type of situation from town to town, Cinque Terre is not the place. There's no way to do that. Amalfi Coast is kind of the place, but not really, given the fact that it's just traffic. We've talked about the Cilento Coast. That is a pretty close way to do it in terms of there is a road that hugs most of the coast that you can just drive down, and it goes through different towns. It's quite beautiful, but it's not like, I'm saying that because sometimes like in music videos and stuff, you see like the, wind in their hair and they're driving down the coast. And I'm like, they're going to the same, 2 kilometers back and forth to get this video. There's no, wherever they are, it does not exist.
And there's tons of coastline in Italy. So, the Cilento near where we are in Campania, in Calabria, I'm sure you can do that. Sicily, you can drive around and there's more space for wind in your hair or stuff like that. So there are other options, but I think 2 of the big places people think of for going to the coast, Amalfi Coast and Cinque Terre, are not the ones necessarily for wind in your hair, driving along the coast
of Italy.
Yes.
And on Friday's episode, we will talk about some more, not minutia, but like also important, just not like the most important things in terms of speed limits, and then chaos, location, things like that. We'll talk about blood alcohol level. We'll talk about fines. We'll talk about automatic versus manual, all sorts of goodies, little nibbles of goodness. I hate that. So that will be Friday's episode. And thank you all so much for listening to me ruin the end of this episode.
Thanks for listening. Tanti abbracci.